You are watching a football match right now. Somewhere in Europe, a Moroccan kid born in Brussels or Amsterdam or Madrid is sprinting down the wing, leaving defenders behind. The crowd roars, and somewhere in Casablanca, millions of people who have never left North Africa are watching that same kid and feeling something deep in their chest. That feeling has a name, and it took Morocco 50 years to build it. This is not a story about talent. Every country has talent. This is a story about a decision, a long, painful, expensive, controversial decision that most people laughed at when it started. And it turned a country that had never gone past the second round of a World Cup into one of the most feared footballing nations on earth. Let's go back to the beginning. In the 1990s, Moroccan football was a mess. The domestic league was underfunded. Stadiums were crumbling. Coaches were underpaid. And the best players Morocco produced kept leaving. They left for France, for Belgium, for the Netherlands, for Spain. They took Moroccan blood and Moroccan skill, and they poured it into European academies, and Europe got better. Morocco got nothing back. For decades, this was just how it worked. A poor country produces raw talent. A rich country polishes it, and then the rich country gets the glory. But then something started to shift. In the early 2000s, Moroccan football officials began asking a question that sounds simple but is actually revolutionary. What if we stopped losing, not on the pitch, off it? What if we built the infrastructure so good that the talent stays longer, develops faster, and comes back? That question became a blueprint, and the blueprint became something called the Mohammed VI Football Academy, opened in 2009 in Saleh, just outside Rabat. It is not just an academy, it is a statement. 17 pitches, medical facilities, dormitories, nutrition programs, psychological coaching. It was built to compete with the best academies in Europe, not to imitate them, but to beat them on their own terms. Researchers who study football development, including Simon Cooper and Stefan Szymanski, authors of Soccernomics, have long argued that the biggest predictor of international football success is not population size or natural talent. It is investment in structured youth development over a sustained period. Morocco read that finding and took it seriously before most African nations did. The results did not come overnight. They never do. For years, the academy quietly produced players. Some went to European clubs, some stayed in the domestic league. The pipeline was being built in the dark, invisible to the outside world. Then came the diaspora strategy, and this is where Morocco did something genuinely clever. Most countries with large migrant populations abroad treat those communities as distant relatives. Morocco treated them as assets. The Royal Moroccan Football Federation began actively courting players born in Europe to dual nationals, the children and grandchildren of Moroccan immigrants, and asking them to choose the Moroccan national shirt instead of France, Belgium, or the Netherlands. This was not just sentimental, it was strategic. These players had already been trained in the best European academies, Ajax, Barcelona's La Masia, the academies of Lyon and PSV. They arrived technically polished, physically conditioned, tactically educated. Morocco was essentially importing finished products that Europe had spent millions developing. Achraf Hakimi, born in Madrid, trained at Real Madrid, chose Morocco. Hakim Ziyech, born in the Netherlands, trained at Ajax, chose Morocco. Sofiane Amrabat, born in the Netherlands, trained in Europe, chose Morocco. Player after player after player. The list goes on and reads like a who's who of European academy football, all wearing red and green. Dr. Paul Darby, a sports sociologist at Ulster University who has spent decades studying African football migration, calls this kind of reverse brain drain a once-in-a-generation shift. Countries that used to bleed talent are now learning to harvest it. But the diaspora alone does not explain what happened in Qatar. In 2022, Morocco walked into the World Cup and did something no African nation had ever done. They reached the semifinals. They beat Spain. They beat Portugal. They held Belgium. They showed defending structures that confused analysts across the globe. Their pressing was organized. Their transitions were sharp. Their set-piece work was meticulous. This was not chaos football. This was a system, and systems do not appear by accident. They are coached. Walid Regragui, the man who coached that Morocco team, was not a famous name before Qatar. He had built Wydad Casablanca into African champions. He understood the Moroccan player, both the ones who grew up in Casablanca and the ones who grew up in Brussels. He knew how to stitch them together into something unified. He built a dressing room that was proud, genuinely proud, not performatively. That pride showed in every defensive run, every sprint to press, every player throwing themselves in front of a shot. Behind Regragui was infrastructure. Behind the infrastructure was money. And behind the money was economics. Morocco's football investment is not charity, it is calculated. The government understands something that many countries miss. Football is one of the fastest ways to build national identity, international visibility, and economic return simultaneously. When Morocco beat Spain and Qatar, tourism searches for Morocco spiked across Europe. Brand Morocco, as economists call it, received billions in free advertising in 90 minutes. And then there is the World Cup itself. Morocco co-hosts 2030 with Spain and Portugal and is a co-host of the 2030 FIFA World Cup centenary celebration. The infrastructure being built for that tournament, the stadiums, the roads, the hotels, the media infrastructure is not just about football. It is about positioning Morocco as a modern, connected, ambitious country. Football is the vehicle. Development is the destination. The economic model is documented by researchers at Oxford Said Business School who study the return on investment of major sporting events in developing nations. Their finding is consistent. Countries that treat major tournaments as infrastructure accelerators, not just sporting spectacles, see the longest lasting returns. Morocco has clearly read this research, but none of this would matter without one final ingredient, and it is the one that no spreadsheet captures: belief. When Morocco's players stood in front of their fans in Qatar, many of them were first or second generation immigrants, men who had grown up between two worlds, never fully French, never fully Moroccan, always belonging partially and incompletely to both. And then they put on that red shirt, and something resolved, something that had been split for 20 or 30 years clicked into place. That resolution was visible on the pitch. It was not just effort, it was joy. It was an intensity that comes from playing for something that feels bigger than a contract or a transfer fee. The mothers of those players praying in the stands became one of the defining images of the 2022 World Cup. Not because it was unusual for mothers to love their sons, but because it captured something true about what Morocco had built. Not just a football team, a bridge between the country that raised them and the country that shaped them, between North Africa and Europe, between the past and what comes next. In 2026, when the World Cup comes to North America, Morocco will arrive as one of the most watched teams in the tournament. Millions of Moroccan diaspora in France, Belgium, Canada, and the United States will fill stadiums in red and green. The media attention will be enormous. The commercial value will be enormous. And somewhere in a dormitory at the Mohammed VI Football Academy, a 14-year-old kid is sleeping right now who has not yet heard his name called. He is the next product of this system, the next chapter of this story. It took Morocco 50 years to build a football empire, but here is what nobody tells you. They did not build it by trying to become someone else. They built it by finally deciding to become themselves. You watched that Moroccan kid sprint down the wing at the start of the story. Now you know what is behind that sprint. Not just speed, not just talent, infrastructure, strategy, pride, diaspora, and 50 years of refusing to stay invisible.